So welcome to the program, sir. So
Thank you.
before
Thanks so much.
we request you to continue with your lecture, so let me permit me to just give a brief description of uh, Rajshekhar, sir, uh, to the all the so that all the participants may get acquainted with your research work and your endeavors. Professor Rajshekhar sir is currently a Pro Vice Chancellor to the University of Hyderabad. He has a commendable track record in the field of higher education as an academic and academic administrator. Professor Shekhar associated with with the School of Management Studies since its inception, and he is also coordinating a postgraduate diploma in business management offered by the Center for Distance Education and Virtual Learning, University of Hyderabad. He was also associated with the Telangana State Public Service Commission as one of the members of the committee for formulation of a scheme and syllabus. As the Dean of the School of Management Studies, University of Hyderabad, Professor Shekhar has played a significant role in launching a unique MBA program in business analytics at the University of Hyderabad. He is also coordinating a MOOCs in research methodology for social sciences through SWAYAM of MHRD. Professor Shekhar is appointed as one of the members of the expert committee constituted by the UGC to draft program of MHRD at Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and 1 week training program on becoming a top 100 universities at Monash University, Melbourne, Australia. Professor Shekhar successfully coordinated LEAP Leadership for Academicians program of MHRD at University of Hyderabad, Associate Coordinator. Professor Shekhar obtained his Bachelor of Technology degree in Civil Engineering, Acharya Nagarjuna University, 3 Master's degree in Business Administration from Usmania University, Psychology from Sri Venkateswara University, and Education from IGNOU. He was awarded 2 doctorate degrees in Business Management, Kakatiya University, and Psychology, Sri Venkateswara University. Added to the above, he acquired 2 diploma in Personal Management and Industrial Relations, Kakatiya University, and Computer Science from Hyderabad University. Professor Shekhar also underwent a faculty development program at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, prior to joining the University of Hyderabad. He taught at Kakatiya University and Kamala Nehru Polytechnic for Women. Besides his academic activities, he served various administrative positions in the university, including Dean of the School, Registrar, Dean Students Welfare, Chief Warden, etc. Professor Sheikh edited and co-edited books in the area of consumer protection, supply chain management, and quality management. He also published 77 research papers in reputed international and national journals, books, and conference proceedings. Professor Shekhar successfully guided 15 research scholars for PhD, and 8 more scholars are working currently under his supervision. He is a specialist in the area of service quality and has been doing extensive research in various issues of service quality. He has been running a career counseling weekly column in a leading Telugu daily newspaper, Eenadu, titled Sandehalu Samadhanalu. Professor Shekhar is actively engaged in research as a consultant and principal investigator for DFID, FAO, UGC, and AICTE sponsored projects. Professor Shekhar is visiting faculty of various training institutions, which include UGC Human Resource Development Centers, National Institute of Rural Development and Panchayati Raj, National Institute of Pharmaceutical Education and Research, Dr. Murray Chennareddy Human Resources Development Institute, Andhra Pradesh Human Resource Development Institute, National Institute of Agriculture, Agricultural Extension Management, National Academy of Agricultural Research Management, Indian Institute of Public Health, VRR, Telangana State Police Academy, Navodaya Leadership Institute, National Institute of Hospitality Management, etc. He regularly delivers lectures in the areas of career planning and personality development at various graduate and postgraduate colleges and universities. Professor Shekhar's primary area of interest includes service quality, quantitative techniques, operations management, industrial and organizational psychology, and research methodology. With this introduction, I request Dr. Rajshekhar sir to extend the lecture. And it's always a pleasure for us to introduce you with all your endeavors, sir, because it puts in scope for the participants so that they can, in case if they have any, at the end of the session, if they have any questions in their mind, they can get clarified with such a personality of a huge experience and versatility. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you again. Once more again, I welcome you to the University College of Law for readily agreeing to and giving us a consent to deliver a lecture. Thank you, sir. Over to you now, sir.
Yeah, very good afternoon, Radhika madam, for nice introduction, and also Vijay Lakshmi madam for the invitation, and my dear participants of this program. I could see there are 145 participants. So it is
Yes,
a special training program on research methodology. So I have been into training of research methodology irrespective of the discipline, whatever may be the discipline, but mostly my focus is on social science research methodology. So then what is the difference between science research methodology and social science research methodology? That is one area, but I'm not getting into the details. But right now, I'm coordinating two refresher courses in research methodology from our HRDC with 250 each. That means about 500 people are now undergoing training. Just before your session, I had an opportunity to deliver a talk there on sampling design and the sample size estimation determination. So the research is one area, so where each one of us would like to be there, but at the same time, each one of us have our own problems in doing research. So just now I was hearing to Anta madam. So then there are some questions also I could see in the chat box. So how do we do research is one biggest question. Then how do we actually publish good quality research papers? Second question. Third question is when you become a faculty member, how do you guide your research scholars? This is the third question. And once you become the faculty, how do you evaluate PhD dissertations? This is the fourth thing. Fifth thing is if you are a reviewer of a research paper, how do you review a research paper? So these are the kind of concerns and questions we have. But unfortunately, at our master's level or undergraduate level, we pay very less emphasis on research methodology. So most of the research methodology, what we do in the PhD coursework. But in PhD coursework also, this becomes like a formality. So we have a pre-PhD exam, we write the exam and we pass the exam and we submit the thesis. But after really completion of the thesis, if somebody is going to be into academics, then they realize the importance of research, and somebody is going to other discipline, they don't mind. That becomes like an ornament, doctorate. But if you are into academics, so then you realize when you really start without knowing so many things. This is what I think is surprise for everybody, including me. When I did my research, I was not aware of most of the things. After completion of PhD, when we start teaching, when we start guiding only, we will come to know more about it. Anyway, so here I have two sessions. Today is one session, tomorrow is another session. So I have nothing to do with your law, though I have several degrees, but law is one area where I do not have any degree. I wish to do that, but right now, the evening law is not there. So otherwise, that is one course I wish to do that. But my entire testing of hypothesis, when I try to discuss, I take only legal examples because the legal examples are more suited for testing of hypothesis, especially evidences and also the errors and so on, judgmental errors, subjectivity, objectivity. There I do take law examples, legal examples. But here, today, I am trying to discuss with you the quantitative research methods. Then tomorrow, we will go to data analysis. So today, let us concentrate more on quantitative research. Why quantitative research or why research? Then why quantitative research? Why not qualitative research? What is the difference between quantitative and qualitative? And what are the factors influencing the decision to make to go for quantitative research? And the advantages and the limitations of quantitative research, then advantages and limitations of qualitative research. Then at the same time, how do we make our research design? whether it is explorative design, descriptive design, causal design. And when you do research, what are the general problems you come across in research design? Certain things I'm going to discuss with you. So let me share my screen. So this is what it is, quantitative methods of research. So this is what we are going to discuss. Let us try to look at research and research methods. So research methods are split broadly into quantitative and qualitative methods. This is how we are trying to look at. So which you choose will depend on your research questions, your underlying philosophy of research, your preferences and skills. So it all depends on research questions. So for example, you wanted to see somebody's behavior, watch somebody's behavior, or you wanted to see somebody's decision-making style, or somebody's argumenting skills, or you wanted to assess somebody's skill set, or you wanted to assess somebody's communication skills. So then what kind of methodology we should choose? Or we would like to look at the performance, we would like to look at the impact, we would like to look at the relationship between two variables. So under these circumstances, what kind of methodology we are supposed to choose? So your research question is the one which is going to decide the methodology, not the methodology is going to decide the question. Questions are going to decide the methodology. Then your underlying philosophy of research. So each research has got its own background, the kind of underlying philosophy of your research, whether it is quantitative or qualitative. Say for example, some disciplines like management, so we mostly depend on quantitative research. Economics, they mostly depend on quantitative research. But anthropology, they mostly depend on qualitative research. Sociology, partly quantitative, partly qualitative. So psychology, highly quantitative. Education, quantitative, qualitative. So it also depends on the nature of the subject. If you take the law, mostly your studies are based on case studies, judgments, case studies, or maybe nowadays even you are also into empirical research. Sometimes our research is a case study approach, sometimes our research is observation, sometimes our research is highly qualitative, sometimes our research is survey. It all depends. So based on that, we are going to choose your research method. Then more than that, in your preference. So if you ask me, my preference is always for quantitative research, personally. So then, whenever I do research, I prefer to do in quantitative approach. And my skill set as a researcher, my skills, I'm very good at quants, I'm good at data analysis, I'm good at softwares, I'm good at statistics. Then I prefer to do quantitative research. But if I go and speak to my colleague in social sciences, in political science or anthropology, they say that we prefer to do qualitative research. So sometimes discipline also may have some differences, and also the preferences and the skills. You are good at that, you can go for it. And nothing is great, nothing is hopeless. So both are equally good, both are equally bad. And each method has got its own advantage and disadvantage. So then let us say what is qualitative research and the quantitative research. I think today I'm going to discuss about quantitative, but obviously when I speak about quantitative, we should also understand what is qualitative. Because qualitative is non-quantitative, quantitative is not qualitative. So other than that, there are two things, quantitative and qualitative. So here qualitative research study things in their natural settings, attempting to make sense of or to interpret phenomena in terms of the meanings people bring to them. So qualitative researchers study things in their natural settings. So that means mostly the ethnographic studies, anthropological studies, sociological studies, or even partly in education. I think the classroom settings, college settings, school setting, the natural settings, attempting to make sense of or to interpret phenomena in terms of the meanings people bring to them. So what kind of meanings people are bringing. So it is highly qualitative. It is like peeling onions. Qualitative research is like peeling onions. So as you are peeling the layers after layers, you try to get more and more insights. So this is qualitative research. The quantitative research is a formal, objective, systematic process. So when we say quantitative research is formal, qualitative is informal. Quantitative research is objective, qualitative research is mostly subjective, and it is systematic process. Quantitative is systematic process. I can't say qualitative is non-systematic, but compared to quantitative research and qualitative research together, in quantitative research we have more of a systematic process in which numerical data are utilized to obtain information about the world. So this is very important of quantitative research. Numerical data, we are trying to obtain numerical data to understand the world, to understand the human behavior, to understand human decision making process, to understand various dimensions of society, human life, and a research method which is used to describe and test relationships, to examine cause and effect relationships. This is another important thing. So a research method which is used to describe and test relationships. I think when there are two variables, I am trying to test the relationship, describe the relationship, and also to examine the cause and the effect relationship. What is the cause? What is the effect? So if you look at our most of our day-to-day life experiences, so there are effects, there are causes. Something is causing, and because of the cause, something is affecting. So what is the cause? What is the effect? What is causing what? Say, for example, now we are in the times of corona pandemic. When corona was identified first time, so it was a kind of a strange disease. Then people started trying to know this is because of a virus. Then what kind of virus? And how this virus can survive? How we can eliminate that virus? How do we handle that virus? How do we combat with that virus? How do we live with that virus? How do we manage with that virus? I think we are now trying to learn. Last I think 5 months we have been having a great learning experience. 5 months ago, our understanding about the coronavirus and everything was not so great. But after 5 months, if you look at, we are able to have a lot of solutions to the problem. But the only problem is how many of those solutions are valid? The next question. So that's what I think, most of the things what is in circulation in WhatsApp, I don't think, most of them are having any research base. That is where, as a researcher, we need to also look at the things unless it is state supported by research. And not all the research outcomes are reliable. This is also another kind of a problem. Typically, yes, but mostly our experiences because whenever we say research, we always feel that somebody must have done very systematic and scientific work. But today, when we look at most of the research papers and dissertations, though they are not systematic, though they are not scientific, but people are publishing papers, people are getting degrees awarded. So it doesn't mean that that findings are going to be research findings, though it can be called for the namesake of research findings, but they cannot be validated, they cannot be reliable. Mostly the problem is the problem with the objectivity, the problem with the systematic process, the problem with the right tools to be used for data analysis. So either tools are right, but the situation is wrong, or situation is right, tools are wrong. We are using the right tools in wrong situation, wrong tools in the right situation. So as a researcher, you are given a toolbox, then you are supposed to identify right tool for the right situation. And sometimes you may have the tools, but you should know how to use them. It's like a weapon. It's like a weapon. It's like a tool. So you should know how to use it. That is where I think the quantitative research is very important. So it is mostly in the quantitative research we are trying to convert the data into information. There is a data, then there is the data. The data is processed to information. So let us look at the quantitative versus qualitative difference. Quantitative is a controlled environment. Qualitative is a natural or complex environment. Quantitative believes in experimentation. Qualitative in interaction. Quantitative is deduction. Qualitative is induction. So we know what is deduction, what is induction. General to particular, and that is deductive. Particular to general. General to specific. Specific to general. So deduction, induction. And whereas in quantitative everything is number, whereas in qualitative it is word. So it's mostly expression. The research is objective, whereas in quantitative. Whereas in the qualitative, researcher is a participant. When the researcher is participant, the researcher also carry a lot of experiences, lot of experiences. For example, when whatever topic law people are doing, so if the same research topic is given to me, my way of doing your problem is different from you yourself looking at your problem, because you are law graduates, law postgraduates, law doctoral scholars, and you are very much into that environment, and your way of understanding the problem is different. And when I am coming as an outsider, the first time I am trying to expose myself to the situation, my way of looking at the problem is different. So when yourself is also part of it, somewhere your biases, likes, dislikes, differences, choices, prejudice, everything is going to be matter. But whereas in the quantitative research, I think we can minimize that subjectivity by using effective tools. So that's where objectivity. So here, when we are speaking about the quantitative research and the qualitative research, they are all research designs. So there are research designs. There are broadly 3 types of research designs. One is qualitative design, second one is quantitative design, third one is mixed design. Because as we know, there are advantages with qualitative, disadvantages with quantitative. The similar advantages and disadvantages with quantitative. So to complement each other, we try to use both of them together, so that one's strengths are complemented by other weaknesses are complemented by other strengths. So then that is mostly mixed method of research. So here there are 4 main features of research design, which are distinct but closely related. So now I am going to introduce 4 kind of words which are very important for any research. The first one is ontology. Ontology is how you, the researcher, view the world and the assumptions that you make about the nature of the world and of reality. This is what it is. So each one of us also a human being. We are not robots. We are not computers. We are not working with artificial intelligence. We are now living with our own life experiences. We have been part of the society. So when you become a researcher, all of a sudden you are not going to become a saint. You are a human being. Still you carry your emotions, your feelings, your perceptions. So you have your own way of looking at the world and the assumptions that you make about the nature of the world and reality. This is what is called ontology. Epistemology is the assumptions that you make about the best way of investigating the world and about reality. So ultimately in the research what we are trying to do, we are trying to investigate the world about reality. What is reality? So I think there are several things must have happened. Now you are investigating why it has happened or why it has been happening. What is the cause? What is the effect? So today we are going, sometimes 50 years ago information, now you would like to do research today. And then you are now trying to make some assumptions that you make about the best way of investigating the world and about the reality. That is called epistemology. Then methodology. So research methodology, the way that you group together your research techniques to make a coherent picture. Ultimately, you wanted to make a coherent picture for which you have to group together your research techniques to make a coherent picture. Then methods and techniques, methodology, methods and techniques, what you actually do in order to collect your data and carry out your investigation. They are called methods and techniques. So here, the way that you group together your research techniques to make a coherent picture is methodology. So ontology is your assumption about the world. Epistemology is the assumptions that you make about the best way of investigating the world. So your assumptions about the best way of investigation is epistemology. Assumptions about the world itself, nature of the world itself, is ontology. Methodology is the grouping of the research techniques. The methods are actually in order to what you actually do in order to collect your data and carry out your investigation. So these principles will inform which methods you choose. You need to understand how they fit with your bigger picture of the world and how you choose to investigate it to ensure that your work will be coherent and effective. So ultimately your work should be coherent, your work should be effective, and you are trying to answer the questions what you have raised. First of all, you should be able to raise better questions, but I am not getting into that. Good research is good research question. It's very simple. Good research means good research question. Good research means answering those good research questions. The process, the technique, the tools, what we are going to use. So then, there are 4 main schools of ontology, how we construct the reality. how we construct the reality. So one is realism, second one is internal realism, third one is relativism, fourth one is nominalism. So this looks like, it is similar, but definitely there is a difference. But looks like more like a philosophical terms, but here there is a purpose why I am trying to do that, because I am trying to drag you from here, take you to quantitative research. So the realism is the world is real and the science proceeds by examining and observing it. That is summary. The internal realism is the world is real, but it is almost impossible to examine it directly. That is called internal realism. The relativism is scientific laws are basically created by people to fit their view of reality. The nominalism is reality is entirely created by people and there is no external truth. That is nominalism. The truth is realism thinks there is a single truth. Internal realism says truth exists but is obscure. Relativism says there are many truths. Nominalism says there is no truth. Facts. Realism says facts exist and can be revealed through experiments. Internal realism says facts are concrete but cannot always be revealed. Relativism is facts depend on the viewpoint of the observer. The nominalism says facts are all human creations. So these are the four kinds of ontological schools of ontology: realism, internal realism, relativism, nominalism. However, none of these positions are absolute. They are on a continuum with overlap between them. I don't think somebody is totally from realism school or internal realism or relativism, nominalism. Everything it is kind of a combination of things and overlapping, and you may not be fixed at one place and you keep on updating yourself and you may be changing your viewpoints. So whether there is a single truth or there are many truths or there is no truth. And what is the difference between truth and fact is the next question. So the fact can be constructed with the help of evidences. But the truth is absolute truth. So sometimes truth and fact may be same, or truth and fact can be different. So I am not getting into that philosophy of truth and fact. But ultimately, what we are trying to look at is there are different four kinds of schools. But whole idea is you are trying to construct the reality. You are trying to construct the reality for which you are trying to find the ways of constructing the reality. The reality again, the way you are looking at the reality, your assumption about reality, your understanding about reality. That's what I think what you believe as a reality that you would like to project. That is where the subjectivity comes into picture. The epistemology is the way in which you choose to investigate the world. Two main schools are positivism and social constructivism. The positivists believe that the best way to investigate the world is through objective methods such as observation. Positivism fits within a realist ontology. The social constructivists believe that reality does not exist by itself. Instead, it is constructed and given meaning by people. Their focus is therefore on feelings, beliefs, thoughts, and how people communicate the social constructivism. It's better with a relativist ontology. So there are two kinds of main schools of epistemology. One is positivism, and the second one is social constructivism. The positivism speak about the objective methods and observations. Positivism fits within a realist ontology. Whereas social constructionist believes that reality does not exist by itself, it is constructed and given meaning by people. So their focus is therefore on feelings, beliefs, and thoughts, and how people communicate these social constructivism fits better with the relativist ontology. So now epistemology and ontology will have implications for your methodology, because the methodology what you are going to choose, it is also going to depend on your schools from epistemology, whether you are a positivist or social constructionism, or even if it is ontology, realism, internal realism, relativism, nominalism. So based on that, it leads to the methodology, because we are now discussing about quantitative methodology. So realists tend to have positivist approach, tend to gather quantitative sources of data. That is where I have given you all the such information. So you are a positivist approach and realism and the positivist approach, then you tend to gather the quantitative sources of data. The relativist tends to have social construction approach, tend to gather qualitative sources of data. So one is positivist approach, second one is social constructionist approach. If you are a social constructionist approach, you are following it, so then you believe in qualitative data. If you are into positivist approach, we believe in quantitative data. Positivist approach is that the world is through objective methods such as observations. So we are now trying to investigate the world through objective methods. It fits with the realist ontology. The realist ontology speak about the world is real and the science precedes. Then there is a single truth. Facts exist and can be revealed through experiments. I think we are supposed to find those facts. So also consider the role of a researcher, or internal or external or involved or detached. This is another important question. Now remember, these are not absolute. People tend to work on a continuous role for mixed methods and approaches. Instead of going for only quantitative or only qualitative, now we are speaking about the mixed method approach. And also, what is the role of the researcher in the research, whether it is internal or external, he is internal, he is external, or he is involved or detached. That's what I think the methodology is going to look into that. So a note about data, quantitative data is about quantities and therefore numbers. I think when I am saying about the quantitative data, quantitative research, it is more of quantities and numbers. Qualitative data is about nature of the thing investigated, and that tends to be words rather than the numbers. It tends to be words rather than the numbers. I think mostly we are now trying to gather the information in terms of words, expressions, feelings, emotions, reactions, responses. Then from there, you are trying to capture the reality. But quantitative is, you are trying to get the numbers. Then difference between primary and the secondary data sources, because when we have the data, there is the primary data and the secondary data. And be aware of research data management practices and archives of data sets, both in terms of downloading and uploading. The research data management practices when you are trying to use the data. The next important question is choosing your approach. What approach you are going to choose? So your approach may be influenced by your colleagues' views, your organization's approach, your supervisor's beliefs, and your own experience. So maybe influenced by, for example, your colleagues, most of your colleagues are doing qualitative. Then you would be tempted to do qualitative. Or most of your colleagues are doing quantitative. You would like to do quantitative. Or your organization where you are working. This institution is meant for Usmania University Law College, is meant for, or some other university law college is meant for something. Or your supervisor, for example, whoever is going to work with me, I believe in quantitative. So on day one, I say that if you are not going to work in quantitative, I am not the right supervisor. So my beliefs and the personal experiences. There is no right or wrong answer to choosing your research method. So every method has got, the only thing is the right method to be chosen for right situation. So what do we measure? For example, if I wanted to measure distance, so I should be measuring it in kilometers. I cannot measure it in kilograms. So that is one problem. The distance is also too long. I should be measuring in kilometers. I should not measure with centimeters or millimeters. So if I take 15 centimeter scale and I wanted to measure the distance between Hyderabad and Vijayawada, so it is almost impossible to measure. So then I need to have a different way of measuring long distances. So that is where the methodology is going to play an important role. Then whatever approach you choose for your research, you need to consider 5 questions. There are 5 questions you are going to choose. Number 1, what is the unit of analysis? Whether it is country, company, individual, organization, court, advocate, or maybe prisoner or government agency or society, NGO, whatever. That is what is your unit of analysis. Number 2, are you relying on universal theory or local knowledge? That is, will your results be generalizable and produce universally applicable results, or there are local factors that will affect your results? So when I go to a small village and conduct the study, whether those village findings can be generalizable is a question mark. Or I would like to choose a kind of a representative sample of several villages, and these findings of this research can be applicable in some other place. This is what, whether you are relying on universal theory or local knowledge. Then will theory or data come first? First theory comes or data first? Should you read the literature first and then develop your theory, or will you gather your data and develop your theory from that? This is likely to be an interactive, iterative process. So what we are trying to say, first, you are looking at the theory, then getting into data, or you are developing. So it is like deduction and induction. So whether your theory is there and collecting the data and testing the theory, or collecting the data, then you are now making a theory. So whether you are building a theory or you are testing the theory, you are validating the theory, you are extending the theory. You are finding out the new applications of the theory, or you are comparing one theory with other theory. Then will your study be cross-sectional or longitudinal? Are you looking at one point in time or changes over time? So I wanted to see, for example, a behavior of a, I think, somebody who is, I think, given a punishment, and somebody is there in the jail, and he is punished for some kind of a mistake, and he is now in prison. He is in the jail. So you go to the jail and look at all the kinds of prisoners, collect the data once, or you select some 10 prisoners, and you would like to study them over a period of 5 years or 4 years if they have a punishment for life, that is 14 years. So next 5 years, you are going to watch them periodically for every 1 month or so, and you try to see that how their thinking pattern is going to be influenced. Their perception towards society is going to change. So it's like, ethnographic studies also, the same thing. Anthropological studies, ethnographic studies also. Whether you are going for a longitudinal study, that means same sample you are going to study over a period of time, or you are going to have a long cross-sectional study, so you are trying to take the cross-section of the society and trying to take representatives from every sector and trying to do that. Or one group you will take and you try to see that that group progresses for next 20, 30, 40 years. Now there is a child. So that child, how that child is going to grow and his attitudes are formed. His thinking is going to change, and what should be his perception towards society, and what should be his reaction towards crime, and what should be his learning from movies. All these things you wanted to study. Then you study this child from 3rd year or 4th year to the next 25, 30 years. Then you are going to, I think, not only one child, but several children. Then whatever now you are going to do, that's a longitudinal study. Or you would like to have a cross-section study. There is a 1-year-old boy, 2-year-old boy, 3-year-old boy, 4-year-old boy, 5 years. They are different people. So it is a kind of a one time you are trying to study them, but it is not you are traveling with one single child for next 30 years. A child group, you are not going to travel. But you wanted to have some 20 varieties of age representatives. All 20 age representatives you can take, different people at one point in time, and try to do that. That is called cross-sectional, whether it is a cross-sectional or longitudinal. Will you verify or falsify a theory? Whether you are verifying a theory, falsifying a theory. You cannot conclusively prove any theory. The best that you can do is find nothing that disproves it. You find nothing to disprove it. So then the theory is deemed to be proved. So you may not say it is proved. Since I failed to disprove it, the theory is deemed to be proved. So it is therefore easier to formulate a theory that you can try to disprove, because you only need one wrong answer to do so. So that is where theory verification, theory falsification, theory development, theory building, theory evaluation, theory extension. This is a theoretical thing, longitudinal, cross-sectional. Then whether deductive or inductive, or whether you are generalizability or non-generalizability. And the unit of analysis, whether a single respondent or sometimes family, sometimes village, sometimes institution, sometimes court, sometimes jail, sometimes department, sometimes individual, whatever. So that is what unit of analysis. Based on these things, you are trying to choose your kind of decision. So the next one is, when I say quantitative, the quantitative is basically to measure something. You are measuring something. So while you are measuring something, what is that you are trying to look at? So these are the kind of terms you keep on using. The one is variable, that is very throughout our research, we have been using that word, we are going to use that word research. Variable, then attributes, then values, then relationship. So relationship is always represented by an arrow. Values are of course 1, 2, 3. Variable is like development, for example. Attributes are low, medium, high, that is attribute. So attribute is qualitative, value is quantitative. Attribute is qualitative, variable is a quantitative. The relationship could be there among the attributes, among the variables, among the attributes, among the variables. So here the relationship of the values that are assigned to the attributes for a variable. So here low is 1, medium is 2, high is 3. That means the variable is development, but you are now trying to look at low development, medium development, high development. And when you wanted to quantify them, you are trying to say that you are giving them numbers. The labels are given. So that's where when you are doing your research in Likert scale, there are 5-point scale or 7-point scale. So you collect the data from strongly disagree to strongly agree to strongly disagree. But later, while you are making the analysis, you are giving them strongly disagree 1, strongly agree 5, strongly agree 5, whether it is a 5-point scale or whether it is 7-point scale. So you are going to give the numbers later, so values. First you are trying to measure it attributes, then values. Then we are trying to look at the relationship. The next one is, the various levels of measurement. So there are, 4 levels of measurement. We say nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Because when we are speaking about measurement, so we are now trying to use the scale to measure it. So there is a nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, ratio scale. So here, when you look at the nominal measurement, so nominal means, it is something to do with the name. So the values of name, the attribute uniquely, they have the classification. So the jerseys, you have a number. So that is there. Date is also there. Month is there. So the value does not imply any ordering of the cases. For example, jersey numbers in football and dates in a calendar. So the jersey, for example, you have different numbers. It doesn't mean that a fellow who is wearing number 1 is superior to number 2. Number 2 is superior to number 3. Nothing like that. Whether higher number, lower number, nothing. It is like our name. So each one of us will have some name. So we have someone Radhika here, one Vijay Lakshmi here, one Rashekar here, one Irfan is there. Like that, we have different kinds of names. But as such, name has no kind of a sense. So even if you have X, you can have Y, you can have P, you can have K. Doesn't matter. We are just habituated to have a name we have been having. But otherwise, the name is not going to make any sense except it helps us in grouping, it helps us in categorization. That is where the nominal measurement. So here, the nominal, these variables consist of categories that are non-ordered. For example, race, ethnicity is one variable used to classify people. A simple categorical variable is binary or dichotomous. That is 1 or 0 or yes or no. Binary means 1 or 0. Dichotomous is yes, no. For example, did a councilwoman vote for the ordinance change or not? Yes, no. That is the kind of. Then yes or no doesn't make any sense. Whether yes is not superior, no is not superior. It is simply expression of their opinion. When used as an independent variable, it is often referred to as a dummy variable. So that is, I think, tomorrow when we discuss about the regression, then I will discuss something about dummy variable. When used as a dependent variable, the outcome of some phenomena is either present or not. So it is present or absent, 1 or 0, 1 or 0. That is the reason why when we are coding the gender also, so male and female is a kind of a gender. But when you wanted to use it in a mathematical analysis, you need to give them some number. What we give usually 1 and 0. 1 and 0. So 1 and 0. 1 and 0. So then what is happening? This is what we are going to call as a dummy variable. So your gender is the independent variable. We are calling it as a dummy variable. So then what is 1, what is 0, who is male, who is female? So 0 is for female, 1 is for male. This is very simple. In alphabetical order, female comes before male. And in 0 and 1, 0 comes before 1. So 0 straight away goes to F, 1 will go to F. That is where we try to understand. So then with 1 and 0, and smoking, non-smoking. Smoking, yes, no. Then we can say you are smoker, you are 1. Non-smoker, you are 0. Pass, fail. Pass is 1, fail is 0. Positive or negative. Positive is 1, negative is 0. Like that, we try to create a kind of a dummy variable. When used as a dependent variable, for example, positive, corona negative. It is an outcome of experiment. So here is a present or not. That is positive or non-positive. Positive, negative. Present or absent. So present is 1, absent is 0. Then people who have gone for testing and whoever is got positive, you put 1. Whoever got negative, they put 0. Take the total, you get all the positive cases. That is the advantage of 1 and 0 instead of going for 1 and 2. If you go for 1 and 2, the sum of all these 1s and 2s will not make any sense. But if you make 0 and 1, the sum is going to make all 1s are, for example, in gender also, against gender, if I keep against the candidate, if I keep 0 for female and 1 for male, by taking the total, I will come to know what is the total number of males. And yes and no. No, I put 0, yes, 1. Taking the total, I will come to know what is yes. And smoker, non-smoker. Smoker is 1, non-smoker is 0. So by taking the sum, I get all number of smokers. This is how this coding will help us, 1, 0, 0, 1. But I can't say no, 1 is more than 0, 0 is more than 1. There's nothing. The male is more than female, female is not more than male, male and female. Or smoking is more than non-smoking, non-smoking. That, yes, that will not make any sense like house numbers. You have a house number, you can't say that one house number is better house number than second house number. Car numbers. One car number is no way different from other car number. It is only identification mark. That's it. And village name. One village and other village. One college name. These are all nominal. Example for nominal data. For example, I say, how do you come to know about this workshop? So I will give some 4 or 5 options. To internet, to newspaper, to college website, to friends, to faculty and so on. So I think none of them is superior to none of them. And all of them are equally good, and that's where we are unable to differentiate just for naming them. The second one is ordinal. So these variables are also categorical, but we can say that some categories are higher than others. For example, income tax bracket, social class, levels of education. I think there is a hierarchy. Whether we like it or not, there is a hierarchy. We are not supporting the hierarchy, but the hierarchy is existing in the society. Social class. So it is now they are categories, but somehow in the public perception they are arranged in a kind of a sequence. For example, degree. So I say intermediate, BA and MA. All of them are nominal, but they are arranged in a sequence. Intermediate first, then graduation next, and post graduation later. But if I keep MA, MSc, MCom, we can't differentiate between one from another. All of them are nominal. But however, we cannot measure the distance between categories, only which is higher or lower. Only we can say it is higher, it is lower, but we cannot measure the distance between them. So even if we measure the distance is not going to be constant. What is the distance between graduation and post-graduation? What is the distance between intermediate and graduation? It's difficult to measure. Hence, we cannot say that someone is twice as educated as someone else. This is also another problem. So somebody studied 4th class, somebody studied 8th class. It doesn't mean that 8th class fellow is twice intelligent than 4th class fellow. So though the number wise 4 and 8 is more than 4, but I can't say that the 8th fellow, for example, if I have some 2 doctorates, it doesn't mean that I have to double the knowledge of 1 doctorate. So this is all kind of illogical to think of. That's why, but definitely we can say 2 is more than 1. Up to that extent we can say. But the difference between, for example, this ordinal is mostly like a rank. So you have a first ranker, second ranker, third ranker. The difference between ranks, you can say 1 and 2 is 1, 2 and 3 is 1. But the performances may not be same. For example, 99, 98, 1 and 2, and third fellow could be 90 and third. It doesn't mean that all of them are equally spaced. Rank wise they are equally spaced, but performance wise they are not equally spaced. Sometimes the difference could be 0.1, difference could be 20. So it can also be used as a dependent variable. So this ranking. So if you look at when attributes can be rank ordered, so distances between attributes do not have any meaning. For example, code education attainment has less than HS degree, high school degree, some high school degree, some college degree, post-college degree. So like that, if you are going to have, you are going to do the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but the distance between 0 and 1 and 1 and 2 may be same. But the same way the distance is not same as less than high school and the high school 10th fail, 10th pass. I think, for example, if you say 0 and 1, I don't think, the difference is same as the 10th pass or inter pass or inter fail. So the differences may not be able to equate. This is about ordinal. If the distance from 0 to 1 is the same as 3 to 4, physically as number wise, yes, but not as variable wise. Then we have an interval scale. This interval scale, whenever we say, it is like a centigrade Fahrenheit kind of a scale. So here, variables of this type are called scalar or index variables, in the sense they provide a scalar or index that allows us to measure between levels. We can not only measure which is higher or lower, but how much so. But here, 97 degrees, 98 degrees, 96 degrees, we should be able to differentiate. The distance is measured between points on scale with even units. Good example is temperature based on Fahrenheit or Celsius. When we are now measuring temperature, the 50 degrees and 100 degrees, 20 degrees and 40 degrees. So 20 degrees temperature is half the temperature of 40 degrees. Such kind of a relationship we should be able to find, which you could not find in the ordinal. So in the ranking, we were unable to find, but here we can find out. So when the distance between attributes has meaning, for example, temperature in Fahrenheit, distance from 30 to 40 is same as distance between 70 to 80. So note that ratios doesn't make any sense. 80 degrees is not twice as hot as 40 degrees, although attribute values are. So though this 80 degrees is not twice as hot as 40, but because 80 by 40 is 2, and 40 by 20 is 2, you cannot say that this 2 and that 2 is same. So though the ratios, that's what I think, that the ratios don't make any sense. We are only saying 30 to 40, difference of 10 is same as 80 to 70. That difference and this difference is same. But whereas in earlier case, the first rank and second rank difference is not same as sixth rank and seventh rank difference. That is how I think we are improving from nominal to ordinal to interval. I think the best example of this interval is Likert scale, that 1 to 5 scale. 1 to 5 scale, strongly disagree to strongly agree. The last one is a ratio scale. This ratio scale is similar to interval level variables in that it can measure the distance between 2 points, but can do so in absolute terms. So ratio measures have a true zero, unlike interval measures. Interval measures, there is no true zero. So for example, if you look at centigrade and Fahrenheit, so there is a relative kind of a 7.5 for centigrade, 98.4 for Fahrenheit. So that's where I think we are trying to make everything based on that kind of a point. But whereas if the ratio is a true zero, we are trying to look at, for example, one can say that someone is twice as rich as someone else based on the value of their assets, 1 lakh to 4 lakhs to 8 lakhs. So since to have no money is based on the starting point of zero. So and also somebody can have a negative value, negative money, not of loans. It could be negative also. 1 lakh loan versus 2 lakh loan. 1 lakh cash versus 2 lakh cash. So here the ratio scale means absolute numbers. In a simple sense, if you wanted to understand it more clearly, so it is like the cricket, the jersey numbers or names of the players is basically it is like nominal scale. Then who scored highest and who scored second highest, who scored third highest. This is called ordinal scale. Ordinal scale. Then the interval scale is also something to do with the rank, but the ranks now you are trying to place all the players on 1 to 10 scale. You are trying to place the players on a 1 to 10 scale, and you are putting one player, the best player at 10, the second subsequent player at 8, subsequent player at 7, based on their performance. You are now transforming their actual scores into 1 to 10 scale. So that is what is called interval scale. The ratio means their actual scores of the individual. So whatever runs they make, that is what is called ratio scale. So somebody made 80 runs, 70 runs, 60 runs, it is the ratio scale. The names and jersey numbers is a nominal scale, and whoever is the topper, highest scorer, second highest scorer, third highest scorer, this is 1, 2, 3 ranking. And all these persons' game is converted to a 1 to 10 scale and trying to place them at appropriate places. That is called interval scale. The ratio scale is their absolute scores, whatever scores they have made. That is what is ratio scale. I think most of us are familiar with the cricket. I think we can understand these 4 scales with the cricket. So as an absolute zero, that is meaningful. You can construct a meaningful ratio. The fraction, for example, number of clients in past 6 months. That is the number. So it is meaningful to say that we had twice as many as clients in this period as we did in the previous 6 months. So this is absolute numbers. Last month I have 4 cases. This month 8 cases. I can say that this month's score is twice. So this is 4 and 8 is a number. So this is what is called ratio. So the measurement hierarchy is the weakest is nominal, highest is strongest. That is strongest is the ratio. The ratio is the strongest one. Weakest is nominal, and ordinal and interval, they are in between. So interval is the second strongest, but still there is a difference between interval and ratio. So this difference is more when compared to nominal, ordinal and interval. So then tomorrow, while discussing about data analysis, probably I may discuss something about what kind of data and analysis tools we will be using for what kind of scale. For example, nominal scale means we can go for frequencies, and ordinal we have ranks, Based on the ranks, we are trying to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Based on the ranks, we are trying to do some rank correlations. Then interval scale, we are trying to have that averages, mean. We try to take the mean score and standard deviation. The ratio values are something we can do any kind of analysis with the ratio analysis because they are absolute numbers and absolute figures. This is what it is. Then we try to look at the quantitative approaches. So this attempts to explain phenomena by collecting and analyzing numerical data. So that's basically the difference between quantitative and qualitative researches. Quantitative data attempts to explain phenomena by collecting and analyzing numerical data. Tells you if there is a difference, but not necessarily why. May tell you the difference, but why there is a difference, I think you may have to borrow the inputs from the research and the theoretical support, and you may have to explain. But otherwise, it will tell you if there is a difference. Yes, no. Data collected are always numerical and analyzed using statistical methods. So whatever data we are going to collect, it is always numerical and analyzed using statistical methods. Variables are controlled as much as possible, like RCT as the gold standard. So we can eliminate interference and measure the effect of any change. So variables are controlled as much as possible. So we can eliminate interference that measure the effect of any change. Randomization to reduce subjective bias. If there are no numbers involved, it's not quantitative. Some types of research lend themselves better to quantitative approaches than others. So you might try to understand the basic philosophy of quantitative research. It is basically explained by collecting and analyzing the numerical data, collection of the data. For example, age of the respondent is a kind of collection of numerical data. Age, size of the family, this is also kind of a numerical data. Number 2, income of the person is also numerical data. Expenditure, numerical data. Experience in years is also numerical data. The number of crimes committed is a numerical data. Number of years punished is a numerical data. Number of cases disposed, number of cases pending, number of cases registered. These are all numerical data. So we are now trying to explain phenomena. We are now trying to establish a phenomena. For example, if you go to any police station, they have some statistics, the crime statistics. So by looking at the statistics, you will come to know why the cases are more, cases are high. In a particular month, cases are high. In a particular month, cases are low. For example, I can give you a simple example. Every day, all of us have been seeing this COVID-19, the dashboard. So we are now seeing always Maharashtra is at the top. Maharashtra is at the top, and the second place is Bangalore, Chennai, maybe Tamil Nadu, and the third place is Andhra Pradesh. Fourth place is Karnataka. Telangana is somewhere around 6 or 7. So when I look at that kind of a data, if you look at the first column, you see that there are more cases in Maharashtra, more cases in Tamil Nadu, then more cases in Andhra Pradesh when compared to other states like Telangana. So one kind of a quick kind of a impression what we get in Telangana, control. This is one way of looking at it. The second way of looking at is we are now trying to look at the supplementary data, and we just move the dashboard. At some place, you have number of cases, number of tests done, number of tests done. So you look at the number of in one state, you find 20 lakhs, another state you find 15 lakhs, another state you find 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 3 lakh, 50,000. So now you are trying to look at the number of cases versus the number of tests. Then if you take the ratio between these two, I think that is going to give us a better idea. The third kind of a criteria, what I see, the overall population of that particular city or state, population of that particular state. And for this population, and these many people are going to have tested, and these many people are positive. Now, if you bring even state population, for example, why there are more cases in Maharashtra? Because Bombay population is very, very high, and Bombay is the place where it is the hub of all the commercial and business activities, and you find everybody, every state person in Bombay, so Mumbai. So maybe I think that could be the reason why there are more cases in Mumbai, or maybe there are less cases in a particular state like Jharkhand. They may not be testing at all. The tests are very low. That's where Jharkhand is staying low. Or by any chance, all northeastern states are low, having less cases. Then one can also draw an inference that maybe the northeast people a kind of a immunity, better immunity than rest of the India, rest of the country. Or you can say that The temperature, whatever is there at the northeast. I think there are several factors I think we need to get in. I'm only giving an example. Once we look at a statistical data, what kind of meaningful inferences we can draw, interpretations we can make. So tell you if there is a difference, but not necessarily why. You only can say this state has more positive cases, this state has less positive cases. But the table itself will not say why it is so. The data collected are always numerical and analyzed using statistical methods. So tomorrow I am going to spend most of my time on statistical methods. So today just I am only trying to discuss about the philosophy of quantitative research. The variables are controlled as much as possible so we can eliminate interference and measure the effect of any change. So today the biggest problem is when there are multiple variables are interfering. Simultaneously, how do I study the impact of one variable over other variable? For which what we do, we have something called control variable. We try to control some variables and try to see effect of one over other. Then randomization to reduce subjective bias. I think random samples, randomization of the population, randomization of the samples are going to reduce the subjectivity. If there are no numbers involved, it is not quantitative. Some types of research lend themselves better to quantitative approaches than others. I think this particular slide is going to tell the philosophy of entire quantitative research. Then the quantitative data. So from where this quantitative data we will get. So one is surveys. So whenever I say quantitative research, there is a kind of an association we have for the quantitative research is survey. The survey is one which is going to have the data source for your quantitative data is survey, where there are large number of respondents, especially where we have used a Likert scale. Then observations, counts of numbers and the coding of data into numbers. Secondary data, the government data, for example, the COVID data, whatever now you have, if you take the data, so people can make several doctoral dissertations. Then analysis techniques include hypothesis testing, correlations, and the cluster analysis. And some of these techniques I am going to discuss tomorrow when you are given a data set, how you are going to analyze the data. So here in a quantitative research, or qualitative research, we are now trying to say there is a scientific method. So here we start with hypothesis. Of course, before hypothesis, we have a research question, research gap, research question, research objectives, then research hypothesis, then do the experiment. You get the data, that is, analyze the data, then based on that, you are defining the hypothesis. So hypothesis, the predict outcome and design experiment to test outcome. Collect measurements in a controlled environment. You collect measurements in a controlled environment. And apply statistical calculations. Then that is what analysis and interpretation, of course. Refine hypothesis, identify patterns and revise assumptions. So when you look at the data, we are trying to look at the patterns. So before looking at the data, we make some assumption. But after looking at the data, we change our assumptions and we are trying to refine our assumptions. So the quantitative research methods are measurement, when we say population and sampling. That is another important issue. So what is population, what is sample? So when we have either we can go for population study, we can go for sample study. If you wanted to go for population study, you can study entire population. That method is called census method. Population is also known as universe. Then we have sampling. If you have decided to go for sampling method, so it is sample. Then again there are two kinds of sampling techniques: probabilistic, non-probabilistic. In probabilistic, we have simple random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster random sampling, systematic random sampling, multi-stage random sampling. If you go for non-probability sampling, it is judgment sampling, convenience sampling, quota sampling, snowball sampling. Like that, we have this population and the sampling. Then random assignment. So when you have got the data, instead of choosing very subjective things, randomly you assign the group. First of all, you have to randomize the group. From the randomized group, you are now trying to make them into two groups. One is the controlled group, second one is the experimental group. The experimental group, you are going to do the treatment. Controlled group, you are not going to give any treatment, just to be like that. Then you are trying to random assignment and do two groups. Then generalizability, you are now trying to generalize the findings. Then the time, the cross-sectional studies are single experiments. As we have discussed earlier, these are the cross-sectional studies are single experiment or cross-section studies, or longitudinal studies and repeated experiments. So you continuously experiment on the same group, repeated times, that is longitudinal. Cross-sectional, you take the cross-section and you conduct the single experiment. So the experiments, again, we have experiments and quasi-experiments. So this is experimental research, quasi-experimental research, and non-experimental research. So here we have a kind of a group. We have a group. So one is, there is a group before treatment, after treatment. This is one kind of a situation. In the research, what exactly happens is there is something and your intervention is there, and before intervention, after intervention, we are trying to do. The second, in the quasi-experiment, what we are trying to do, we have two groups. One group is experimental, one group is non-experimental. One group is a treatment, one group is non-treatment. That means for one group, you do the treatment. For one group, you are not going to do the treatment. At the end, you are seeing the results. Then in the experimental research, what we do, we take the one group and randomize them. The randomized group we make into two parts. One group we are going to treat, other group we are not going to treat. That is the difference between quasi-experiment and experiment. So this is where the example I can say, the students, for example, who are given tuition and who are not given tuition, for example. So you take a students of a college, school, I think, you take one set of students and you take their performance. You give them a tuition. They go to tuition. After tuition, you look at the performance. And before tuition, after tuition, extra coaching, their performance you compare. This is one part. Second part is, you take one school. They are going to, you take one sample from one school. They are going to a extra coaching. You take another sample from another school. They are not going for any extra coaching, and you look at their final exam results. This is what is called quasi. But here what we are trying to do, you are taking different students from different schools and you are conducting an exam, and based on that score, you are making them into groups. Then you take one particular group, either high performing group or low performing group. From there, 50% of the group you are going to give them extra coaching. 50% of the group you are not going to give an extra coaching, and you try to see. This is what is called randomized. So this is where the experiments, quasi-experiments. Then we have questionnaires to collect the data. When I am saying about the survey, the tool for data collection is questionnaire, but nowadays we are not calling it as a questionnaire, we are calling it as a scale. So scale development. We are now trying to develop a scale. The scale we are going to use to collect the data. Then sometimes you can develop the scale on your own, sometimes you use somebody's scale. So the scale development is another important, interesting topic, and we can do 2 or 3 days workshop on scale development alone. Most of my research is developing scales. Then survey. So once you have it, you can do that. Then especially when we are speaking about quantitative research, also there is something to do with the experiments are associated with that, especially it is a causal research. When you are trying to find out the cause and effect relationship in the experiments, you are comparing one design or process to another. There are several experimental designs. You are comparing one with another, deciding on the importance of a particular feature in a user interface. You are deciding on the importance of a particular feature. There are several features, but you are deciding on a particular feature. Evaluating a technology or a social intervention in a controlled environment. Evaluating a technology. So you are giving a kind of a one of my colleagues from my department. So he wanted to give some kind of tabs to the rural population, and one group he wanted to give them, and another group he doesn't want to give them. And it's like an experimental research. So he wanted to teach both the groups about financial literacy, and the people who are given training in technology, people who are not given training in technology, and how their financial literacy is going to enhance. This is what an experimental research is conducted, a field-based research. Then finding out what really causes an effect. There are different causes and the causing effect, but which cause is most important. And now I would like to say, when there are multiple causes causing, I would like to know on the priority basis which cause is mostly responsible. And finding out if an effect really exists. Sometimes we keep on saying cause and effect, but whether the effect really exists or not, also we are trying to find. So the quantitative researcher mostly worry about is my sample size big enough? This is the biggest challenge And most of the vivas, PhD defense, this is one question the examiner will ask. And this is the kind of, always I say, this is the easy question to ask and difficult question to answer. Because what is my right sample size? This is the biggest challenge. So what is sample size? 200, 300, 400, 600, 800, 900, whatever sample size you choose, people start asking questions. So how do we justify my sample size? So that is another important kind of a topic. We can have another 3-hour session on sampling, sample determination. A lot of formulas, mathematics, theories behind. But in a simple sense, as far as you are concerned, if you wanted to choose a sample size, similar studies which are published in a reputed research journals, whatever is the sample size they have taken, that can be basis for your research. That is one simple solution I can give. The second kind of approach is the tools and techniques what we are going to use. So that those tools and techniques may have some kind of a requirement. I think, for each item, we are supposed to have these many samples. For each item, we are supposed to have these many samples. So then, based on that, these many respondents. Based on that, we are going to fix the sample size. This is the second approach. So then, third one is there's the formula by you do standard deviation, confidence level, error can be tolerated. Based on these kind of formulas, you can calculate the sample size. But always this question is there. So I have my PhD, first PhD and second PhD I have done with 400 samples. But some of my scholars are doing research with, they have completed research with 1,000, 2,000, 2,700, 2,400 sample sizes. So it all depends on the nature of the problem, availability of the data, homogeneity and heterogeneity of the population, and the similar studies which are conducted in that area. And have I used the correct statistical test? This is another kind of a challenge. There are several tests are there, and am I using the right test? Most of the time people use for the sake of using the test. Sometimes people deliberately wanted to use the test which is not required. So for which I think we need to have a comprehensive understanding about this test. Tomorrow I am going to discuss about the statistical testing. Then have I reduced the likelihood of making a type 1 and type 2 error? So this is also tomorrow I will discuss, but for your understanding, type 1, type 2 error is rejecting the null hypothesis when it is true, it is type 1 error. Not rejecting the null hypothesis when it is false, it is type 2 error. To understand it more simple, rejecting a right candidate for the job is a type 1 error. Selecting a wrong candidate for the job is a type 2 error. Or maybe in a legal terminology, a innocent person is punished is a type 1 error, and a guilt is not punished is a type 2 error. I think most of the judgments also, if you look at in the court, so that's where some kind of argument that people who are in the jail, who are in prison, not that all of them are criminals, all of them have made mistakes, because some of them are there as part of type 1 error. And most of the people who are outside the jail in the society, they are not all holy cows. So they are maybe because of type 2 errors. The type 2 error means though they are guilty, but they are not punished because of several reasons. Because as you know, the evidence. So in your legal terminology, witness plays very important role to judge. In the similar way, in research also, the sample, data collection methods, data collection tools, and the perfect data, the evidence. Evidence is nothing but data here. The way you collect the evidences from a crime scene, you have to collect data from the society, data from the universe. But unfortunately, when you casually collect the data, you get a lot of impure data, and data with a lot of errors, data with a lot of inconsistencies and so on. The next question is, are my results generalizable? So whenever I am doing a sample study, whether my findings are generalizable. When I am doing a study in Andhra Pradesh, can be generalizable to Telangana and other places. Telangana, if I am doing, can be generalizable to entire country. If I am conducting a study in India, whether it is generalizable to entire world. So are my results reproducible? This is the next important question. So the same study, somebody else is going to continue and repeat. Are they going to get the same results? It's a question. Am I measuring things the right way? So basically, you are measuring the things. Are you measuring the things in the right way or wrong way? That is also very, very important. The strengths of quantitative research is you can manipulate your numbers to create visual images like graphs. Graphs, I think, diagrams, graphs, you can do that. Concepts can be measured and directly compared to previous or subsequent work. When you are making the the measurement, the numbers are absolute and they can be comparable. They can be also used for further interpretation. And there may be a direct correlation between cause and effect. This is the ideal. It may be possible to generate towards external validity, that is the prediction. The prediction, we are trying to generalize towards external validity. Breadth of coverage of big population. When you are having a big population, you can have a breadth of coverage with the quantitative research. But qualitative research requires a lot of time, lot of energy, and the researcher himself or herself need to be present and the participants, so that they may not be able to cover larger populations. So what is wrong with the quantitative research? Some things can't be measured or measured accurately, because there are some qualitative things you can't measure properly. Sometimes when you are trying to ask some questions also, what you ask, what you understand, what they understand and what they respond and what you record, there is a huge gap. What you are supposed to ask and what you have asked. And what you have asked and what that fellow should understood. And what that fellow thought and what that fellow answered. What that fellow answered, what you understood. What you understood and what you reported. I think these kind of things are there. And this is the biggest problem. I think, the true translation of reality. Because ultimately we are trying to construct the reality. But there are so many loose ends in constructing the reality. And doesn't tell you why. It will say that there is a difference, but it will not tell why. But in a qualitative research, it will simultaneously answer there is a difference, why there is a difference. But here you need to put extra effort to understand why. Can be impersonal, no engagement with human behaviors or individuals. So it's very objective, a positive way. Impersonal means there is no human touch. Data can be static, snapshots of a point in time. So whatever data you collect, that data is valid given that point in time. So today, if I go and collect the data and I get some responses from respondents, but after 6 months, if I go and collect the data, I may get different responses. Because today, the people are under corona crisis, corona pandemic, fear, emotional issues, anxiety, depression. The responses, whatever they have given, may not be repeated or may not be same, whatever they are going to do 6 months before or 6 months after. Can tell you a version of the truth or a lie also. When I am trying to speak to respondent, the respondent may give some response, but it is not investigation, interrogation. Whatever the respondent gives, I may have to report. I don't know whether the respondent is telling the lie or truth. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. This is the one issue. People say lies, damn lies, and statistics. Statistics can also having a lot of scope for misinterpretation, misuse, manipulation. That's where I think one should be careful. The whole may not be equal to the sum of the parts. This is another kind of a problem. So when you are studying the whole, you are studying all sums, and all sums you are adding up, but all sums by adding you may not get the whole, because something maybe beyond this individual sums. Lack of depth, looking at just one part of the whole because of the sample. Sometimes your samples are representative, sometimes they are not representative. Defining everything in terms of numbers is risky when dealing with humans, especially emotions, love, affection, relation. These kind of things, extremely difficult to quantify. So these are kind of references we have. So with this, I'll stop here, and now I stop my presentation. Then I would like to take some questions now. What is the minimum valid percentage of sample size? So there is no percentage of population as a sample size. No connection between sample size and population size. Rather than size of the population, the homogeneity or heterogeneity of the population is going to decide the size of the sample. This is number one. So 10%, 5%, 20% is not. Then how the sample size is decided, as I told you, based on formula. There is a formula. If possible, tomorrow while discussing data analysis, I can show you the formula. So I don't want to bring mathematics into that class. That's where I have not decided. But there is one table given by Krejcik and Morgan in the year 1970. They say beyond 10 lakhs and above, I think 384 sample size is sufficient, provided you have taken care of representativeness. Or otherwise, the similar studies, whatever are there, based on that also you can decide, especially reputed researchers when they are using the similar kind of a study. So then I think, you can do that. Then somebody was, Then there are a theory linked with the designing of survey reports, as most of the cases I have seen the response are restricted and the user is not allowed to post any other key. Similarly, which is a good method of evaluation of the survey report, 3 point, 5 point, or 10 point. So usually we go for the odd number. More the number is better. So right now I am advocating for 7-point scale. 7-point scale. I think 7-point scale is better, and don't go for the odd even number, because you should give a kind of a chance to the respondent to be neutral. So don't go for a even number. The sample size has an impact on statistical techniques. Yes, the sample size also going to decide small sample, large sample. Based on that, the test is going to decide. The generalizability also decides. The generalizability also decides the kind of sample size, representativeness, and so on. Then somebody said, they only follow the government statistics, or do we need to explore other sources? See, because we believe that government statistics are reliable. Because ideally, if you are able to get some other sources, you can use, but always the validity of the those sources are questionable. So I think better you can go for government data in the absence of any other data. But if it is a company data, I think you can go for company data. So you can have that company data and you can use it. But as far as government data is concerned, for example, since you are from law department, so whatever data is provided by Judice and other kind of websites of Supreme Court and High Court and other things, that I think we need to believe the data and we have to use it. Even today, when I'm speaking about Corona also, I think we cannot go by the newspaper data. We can only go by the data released by government of Telangana, government of Andhra Pradesh, government of India. But you may have your own reservations about the way they are being shown. But in the absence of other genuine source of the data, I think we should believe this data and we should go, and definitely there is a possible error and we may have to bear with that error, because we may not be able to reproduce the reality. There are so many issues. There are so many issues are there, and so many errors will be there. But whole exercise of our quantitative techniques is the errors are bound to be there, but we need to minimize. That error, for which I think we need to choose the right tool, for which reliability and validity plays very important role. The reliability, validity itself will take 2 to 3 hour session, and that is altogether. Yes, please.
Yes, sir. I think we have covered. You have covered all the questions.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Sir, now I request Mr. Nishit to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the college, sir.
On behalf of University College of Law, Osman University, and also on behalf of all the participants, I thank you for your extensive presentation. As it's very important even for legal scholars to have a knowledge on these issues. And thank you so much, sir. And we'll be looking forward for your next session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. Tomorrow again we'll meet at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.